skirted the line. Hey y'all, it's Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today, and for this video we are going to be doing my November wrap-up. Alright, so before we get to anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, and you have to tell me in the comments what is the best book that you read in November. I had a really solid reading month for November, and so I'm really excited to dive into these books with y'all. But before we get into any reviews, we got to talk about the stats. So in November, I read 15 books, and across those, I read 4,928 pages. That is a great page count, and it does also include audiobook hours. But when it comes to listening hours, I did actually listen to over 68 hours this month. My average rating was 3.93 stars, so not bad overall, and I did have 2 DNFs. As for genres, I read 4 fantasies, 1 graphic novel, and 3 horror, 1 magical realism, 2 manga, 2 nonfiction, and finally 2 romance. Then when it comes to the little goals that I keep for myself, I actually did a really solid job. I read more than 1 book that was 450 pages or more. I obviously did read a comic and a graphic novel, plus I read a nonfiction book, so we were doing really great there. Then when it comes to my series stats, while I did start into 2 new series, I also read 1 continuation. I finished out 3 series, and then I did make the decision that I would not be finishing 1 series. Final stat, my goal this year was really to focus on reading my own TBR, and I read 6 books off of that baby in November. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about the books that I read this month. A little reminder, I only review books in my wrap-up, which I didn't read for dedicated videos. For example, I did have a Raid My Shelves, a book haul revisited, as well as continuing 5-star series videos. Both of those have full reviews of the books I read for them, so I won't be talking about them here. But when it comes to the books that I am going to be reviewing, I figured let's order these from my lowest rated to my highest rated. I do have a good few to work through today, so I'm going to try and keep these reviews a little shorter. Starting at the top, unfortunately, I did decide to DNF Off the Map by Trish. This is the final book in the Beck Sisters series, and while I really enjoyed the first one, and I liked the second one, the third one just really was not for me. And honestly, it kind of felt like a stretch to have it be in this series anyway, seeing as how the title of the series is the Beck Sisters, and there's only 2 sisters. And this third book is following Carla, who is best friends with the main character from the first book, and she's really not even that prevalent in that book to really warrant her having her own story, in my opinion. But Carla is traveling to Ireland to actually attend the wedding of the main characters from the first book, and ends up taking a kind of impromptu road trip with Keen's brother. This was a little too insta-list for me. I just wasn't really feeling much chemistry developing between the 2 of them. Along with that, I was not really a big fan of the female main character, Carla. I don't know, she had a little bit of a too unattached personality. I also didn't really like the way she would respond to the male character trying to be open and vulnerable with her. That definitely soured my opinion of her. But this author across the board tends to have heavier elements included into her story so that she can build out the characters and see how they work through this trauma in order to, find a new happiness in a romantic relationship. This one, Carla's father has been suffering from dementia, and she has not visited him in like 5 years. Granted, he tells her he does not want her to watch him deteriorate, but even still, I literally cannot imagine that. Not seeing your dad for 5 years, especially when you have a very healthy relationship. After that, I just had a really hard time feeling empathetic for Carla. I decided I'm gonna give up on this one. I was not really feeling the romance anyway. No hard feelings. Next up is Locklands by Robert Jackson Bennett. This was one of the last books that I managed to squeeze in right at the end of the month, and also officially closed out this series for me, so knock something off my spreadsheet for next year. This is the 3rd in the Founders Trilogy, a series that I've been really enjoying. Actually, that continuing 5-star series video I referenced does have a review for the 2nd book. While I really loved the first book and I really liked the 2nd book, unfortunately this 3rd book just kind of fell down for me. The characters have this magical ability of scribing where they are essentially coding instructions onto items around them. While I do think the author has done a phenomenal job throughout this entire series of coming up with these really creative and clever ways to use this ability in order to do things in this fantastical world, it kind of felt like he went a little bit too far here. He became so wrapped up in what interesting weapons or abilities can he have items or even people do, explaining all of it to you so that it made sense. And I didn't need a constant in-depth explanation of every little piece of magic that was being used. It felt like we were constantly getting all this info dumping. Along with that, I also was really bummed that we weren't seeing much of the found family that I had grown to love in the second book, and I also think that's definitely a big hindrance of my enjoyment here. We only really have like 2 specific recurring characters from the prior books, and while I love them, there just isn't enough there between just the 2 of them to make up for the other missing members. We did have some characters who had previously been side characters play a more integral role, or we had new characters that were introduced and a little bit more prevalent here, but I just never felt that strongly about them, and so I don't feel like the stakes around them really had the impact as it would have if I cared more about these characters. Now that I'm thinking about that, actually no, there are 3 major recurring characters because one of them is my favorite, and they have a very interesting role in this story, and I did really like how they were used and the exploration of their background, how that played into the overarching plot of the series. When it comes to the actual end of this book, I like it. I don't know if I like it as an end for this series though, and so that's really weird. It gave me very conflicting feelings. Unfortunately, in the end, this came out to be about 3.25-ish stars. I am gonna go ahead and round that up to 3.5 for my little graphic because I love the characters and I really love the world. I just felt like unfortunately the writing style in this one kind of fell down for me, and I just did not love it nearly as much as I really wanted to, unfortunately. After that is When the Tides Held the Moon by Venessa, Vida, Kelley. This was actually my Geek Squad pick, so it was the book club pick for my Patreon. I had a spoilery reading vlog of it go up. If you're interested in that, I'll put a link to my Patreon down below. But so this one is set in like early 1900s New York, and we are following Benny, who's a Puerto Rican immigrant working as a blacksmith, and he gets commissioned to build this giant tank for this sideshow, and eventually learns that they are going to kidnap a siren to house in this, and it's going to be the draw to pull all these people in, make them a bunch of money, and kind of revitalize this menagerie of unusual people that they have. I think it kept getting pitched as Shape of Water meets The Greatest Showman, and I've never watched either of those, so that didn't really appeal to me too much. I loved the idea of this. I thought the sideshow element was very interesting, and I actually really enjoyed the discussions around that and their place in history, tying that into Benny as a Puerto Rican immigrant who is also unfortunately very deep in the closet and an asthmatic as well. I liked how those elements paralleled with his character. I never really felt very strongly about the merman character, honestly. I don't feel like he had too much personality. As an extension of that, I never felt very strong about the romance. I think it was cute, it was very sweet. Whenever they're like confessing their love to each other, I just was not there. I did not really feel that. I also thought that the plot itself was very predictable, and that's not a problem, but when the pacing is insanely slow and dragging to get there, it does kind of make for a less enjoyable reading experience because I could already see everything that was going to happen plot-wise. I was just waiting for us to reach it. I also felt like the writing style wasn't the best. I think this could have used with a little bit more editing, tightening up around certain things. In the end, it came out to about 3.5 stars. I liked the idea of this a lot, and there were certain elements of the plot that I really enjoyed, but overall, unfortunately, it just wasn't the new love I thought it was going to be. After that is The Princess Stakes by Amalie Howard. This is the start of the Daring Dukes series, which I've been really intrigued to try out because it is a historical romance series with main characters who are people of color. And in this first one, we are following Sarani, who is the daughter of a Maharaja, and at the start of the book, unfortunately has found that a coup is taking place, and so she is in danger and stows away on a ship headed for London in the hopes that her mother's side of the family will be welcoming to her. Come to find out, the captain of this ship is actually a jilted ex-lover of hers. And one thing Howard really excelled at here is the wonderful tension between these two. I don't know if I would ever say they were enemies, but there is so much antagonism going on between the two of them, and it's really fun because they both lean into it, but at the same time, they're like eye-screwing the hell out of each other. I also really enjoyed Sarani as a female main character. She was very strong. She was not going to let herself be a victim. She always threw herself into whatever it was she was doing 110%. So I really loved that she always was willing to fight back and had a witty quip in response to Ryston. That said though, I didn't feel nearly as strong about the hero character. He was fine. I do wish the romance would have been a little bit more romantic, honestly. The spy spice. Very solid. I think once they break that sexual tension, it's delicious. For how mean these two are to each other for a lot of this book and the amount of drama they go through, I really wish there would have been some grander love declarations or some really sweet and romantic, intimate moments between the two of them. I think that definitely would have amped up my enjoyment of the romance overall. So this one also was a 3.5 stars, but it is leaning more towards 3.75. I'm definitely going to continue the series, and I'm very intrigued to try out more from this author. All right, then we have The Lamb by Lucy Rose. This one is a coming-of-age story that has sort of a dark fairy tale twist on the vibe of the story. We are following 11-year-old Margot, and she lives with her mother. They are right on the fringes of society and take in these people they call strays and utilize them to fulfill some of their more dark urges. This is another one where there are certain elements of it that I really enjoyed. I didn't know about the coming of age angle of the story, but I actually really liked it. However, I feel like the story dragged out a little too long. I think maybe about like 75 pages in the middle could have definitely been cut out. I really enjoyed the tone of the story, this like hunger that permeates everything, the feeling of isolation that just surrounds Margot, the complicated relationship she has with her mother, with her friends. I also really enjoyed the gore, but again, I just feel like the story itself did not need to be nearly this long. It felt like it was being dragged out. I also was not particularly surprised with any of the twists in the story. Because of that fairy tale feel element, I do have very conflicting feelings about the end of this, honestly. I still have not come to the decision if I like it or hate it. It truly depends on my thought process at the time. But I am glad I finally got around to reading it at the very least. Plays into some of the same things I really enjoyed with woman eating, certain hunger, the eyes are the best part. In the end, this one was also 3.5 stars, but I would say this was like a 3.75-ish. So next up is another ridiculous queer romance book. This one I 100% read for the lulz. I needed something fast and easy to try and squeeze in some more pages at the end of the readathon this month. Taking a gander through Kobo Plus, and I stumbled upon Hot Mall Santa by A.J. Truman. And like I said, read this for the lulz. It sounded like it would be a silly good time, and it definitely was. So we start out following Tom, who works at some store in a mall, very reminiscent to like Crate and Barrel. They're heading into the holidays, and the mall hires a new Santa who turns out to be Randall, this guy who is absolutely drop dead gorgeous, brings in a lot of traffic into the mall, catches so many people's attention, including Tom's. So what starts as a silly little fling with Hot Mall Santa eventually develops into something more. I liked the characterization of each of the characters. There was something there to give them a little bit more dimension and make me invested more in their story, as well as in the romance that developed between them. Another one where some of the twists the plot ended up taking, I wouldn't say were surprising. The third act conflict was something I saw coming from a mile away. And oh my God, the dirty Christmas puns had me absolutely dying. This is 4 stars purely for entertainment value. You have to expect it to be campy and silly and fun. Next up is Behind the Horror by Lee Mellor. This is a nonfiction book that I picked up on a whim and also ended up really enjoying it. Every chapter deep dives into a different true crime case, which has influenced certain films. So it perfectly mixed my interests in true crime and movie trivia. I think if you have spent any time in the true crime community, chances are you've probably heard of some of these cases. You've definitely heard of some of the movies. In my case, I didn't know some of these movies are based off true cases, or I had heard of the crimes themselves, but I didn't know there were films inspired by them. It's definitely a niche interest, and it worked very well for me. And while I did really enjoy it, I did find a few details here and there that weren't accurate or skirted the line. So it did make me start to question some of the details the author had woven in here, and if all of them were true, if all of them were 100% real. Kind of always a problem when it comes to nonfiction books, but even still, I did really enjoy this. This is another one that's like 4 stars. I don't think I could give it higher because of the issues I found with it, but I did really enjoy it at the very least. Next up is The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor Lavelle. This is a short little horror book that I've been meaning to get around to for quite some time, where we are following Tester, a man who dabbles in dark magic while living in Harlem. Really, he's just determined to try and make enough money for he and his father to survive. However, he bites off way more than he can chew when he ends up going to give this spell book to a sorceress in Queens, and a whole slew of problems arise for him from there. I really liked this one. It's definitely inspired by Lovecraft, very obvious, and I really enjoyed it for that, especially because a lot of the themes in this weave around race. I really liked the aesthetic of the story overall, like the vibes of it. It set you into the world perfectly. At the start, I was worried the plot was going to be kind of boring, but honestly, it really evolves, but it kind of does the same thing I've found with some of Lovecraft's stuff itself that I've read, which is by the end of it, I'm not 100% sure I know exactly what happened. I just know at the very least I had a really good time reading it. So this is another one that was 4 stars. I basically binged through this little thing one morning and really enjoyed it. I would say Victor LaValle has redeemed himself in my eyes, and I would be willing to try something else by him now. So if you have any recommendations, leave them in the comments. I think I'm gonna go with this one next up is On a Sunbeam by Tillie Walden. This is another whim pickup that I specifically did on the last day of the readathon because it's a graphic novel, and I thought it's a chunky boy. I could probably work through this in one morning. And I did. Fun fact, this is actually Josh's copy because he read this a while back and really enjoyed it. So we start out following Mia, who lives in this sci-fi society. She has just recently joined this crew of people who travel around the universe to renovate buildings and eventually come to find out that Mia has a ulterior motive for joining this crew. We have flashbacks to when she was a freshman in high school and ends up falling in love with the new girl, Grace, who also has a mysterious background. I gotta say, it's been a minute since I've read a YA coming of age story that I enjoyed as much as this one. And I'm not gonna lie to you, the art definitely played a major role into that. I really love the utilization of color. So when we have the flashback scenes, they're all in this black and white grayscale, though there are occasionally certain colors that will be utilized. And so it has this like very monochromatic feel to it. But as the story continues, it starts to get more and more colorful. Certain worlds they're on have different color schemes. So I really liked that as well. Here we go. This is a good example of one of the pieces I really enjoyed. I also thought the sci-fi world was very interesting. There's not a ton of world building done around it, but the elements we do get were really intriguing, and I would be curious to see if Walden ever does more in this universe. I feel like Josh mentioned there's another graphic novel set in the same universe. I also really enjoyed the characters, the little found family, the romance itself was very cute. I think the author actually did a really good job of building out these characters in these little flashback scenes when we get to know a little bit more about them. So really glad I finally got around to this one. This was a very strong 4-star. And maybe 4.5, possibly. It's a graphic novel, so of course I always would want more from it. Hard to do that in this sort of a format, especially when it's already this long. Next up is Rest Stop by Nat Cassidy, and I definitely need to read more of this author's work because we are 2 for 2 of books that I really enjoyed. So Rest Stop is a horror novella. We are following Abe, whose grandmother has just recently suffered from a stroke, and he is traveling to visit her, but along the way stops at this little rest stop, goes to use the bathroom, and gets trapped in there. And I don't really want to say too much more, but I really enjoyed this. Abe is Jewish, and we quickly learn that he doesn't really have very strong feelings about his culture, his faith. They're parts of him, but he doesn't think they're really integral to who he is. However, survival and generational trauma are definitely very important elements in this story, and I really liked how Cassidy utilized them. Plot itself was super weird and just like took some turns I was not anticipating. I would have loved a little bit more from this. It's a novella, so unfortunately that's kind of just an issue that comes with it being so short. And I'm not 100% sure I loved the ending, but I was totally hooked whenever I was reading this. And like I said, I definitely need to check out more of Cassidy's stuff. So this was a 4.5 stars. Then we have got The Unbroken by C.O. Clarke. I was really glad to finally get around to starting this fantasy series. We are following Terrain, who is a soldier that had been conscripted when she was a child to work for this country that is supposed to be very a la France. However, the country she is from is very reminiscent to some of those in North Africa. But at the start, Terrain gets blamed for the death of a fellow soldier. However, she is not responsible and ends up kind of cashing in on this favor from the princess. Luca's father was once king. However, he has since passed, and now her uncle has been ruling in his place while she grows up, while she learns more about the political games. But she believes she is now ready. However, her uncle is not letting go of the throne, so she is determined to try and politically maneuver things around in order to make it so that there is no other choice but for her to take power. And she's planning to do that by having Terrain join this rebellion in her country of origin. I ended up really enjoying this one. I gotta say, it's definitely one of those where like you get the base synopsis, but things really unfold from there, and it is a wild time. Initially, I felt very conflicted about Terrain, but by the end of the book, I really enjoyed her and was rooting for her. Whereas on the opposite side, I really liked Luca in the beginning, but by the end of of it, I have very conflicting feelings about her. And I'm so intrigued with how this book ends on like where things are gonna go next. A whole map that has plenty of other countries we have not explored yet. There's a lot of messy things in the relationships in this book. The romantic ones, the familial ones, those between the soldiers, the people they have to rely on in order to survive. There's also a religion element tied into this, as that is how Terrain's home country utilizes magic. And while it was included here, it's definitely not super prevalent, but again, with how things end, I'm thinking it's gonna be a lot more at the forefront in the next book, and so I cannot wait to read the next one. I really liked this, and obviously I'm so curious what's gonna happen next. So this one was a very strong 4.5 stars, and I need to get my hands on the second book. Final two are my highest rated ones, and honestly I'm just gonna pair them together because it's the last two in the Library Wars series by Kiiro Yumi. This is a shoujo manga series where we are following Kashihara, who has just recently joined the Library Task Force. In this world there is an issue of censorship going on, and so the Library Task Force is basically a army group that actually fights for the library, protects them from this group called the Media Betterment Committee. Honestly, I feel like these last two had the most amount of plot revolving around the Media Betterment Committee and the fight against censorship, and of course also had majority of the major developments around the romance that Kashihara has with her instructor Dojo. This was silly, it was cute. I mean, when the kiss finally happened, I was like screaming finally. I really enjoyed the epilogue chapter as well. Really, my only complaint that I have about this is I do wish we had had a little bit more acknowledgement around a romance between two side characters that I'd really started to enjoy, but that was not the focus of the story, so I'm not going to ding it for that. But it was a really fun end of the series. I'm glad to officially have finished it out, so I did go ahead and give both of these 5 stars. All right, and on that note, that is officially it for today, y'all. So thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, let's leave a rose emoji in the comments. I have links to all of my socials, as well as a few ways you can support me down in the description. I come out videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!